All right, hey everyone. Welcome back to King. This is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. You can tell I haven't had morning coffee yet because I'm already starting to mess up my words and things. First of all, Happy New Year. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone had a good, well, relaxing, if not good break. I know 2020 was kind of hard on everyone, so I hope 2021 is going to be a little bit better. Yeah, so not even the first video of 2021 I've done, but this time I remember to wish everyone a happy New Year's. So at least there's that. So before we dive into the chapter proper, just a few kind of housekeeping items I want to address before we get into things. The first being I was going to do a pre-1000 chapter kind of with my thoughts and ideas of where the arc is going, what unresolved plot threads are still dangling, things like that. But then I look back at the one I'd already done a couple of months ago, 7 months ago now, which is kind of hard to believe. And not a lot really changed from that video because by the time that video came out, we were just in the raid. It was the chapter where Luffy and Zoro were getting mad about the spilled Oshiruko everywhere, and the raid was just starting. So not a lot really has transpired between then and now. So it felt kind of pointless to kind of just rehash the same thoughts I had in that previous video. So once I'm done recording, I'll link the description of that previous one in the comments or in the description for the video if anyone wants to go back and take a look at it, my thoughts for that. That said, after I'm done the chapter review and I have my thoughts, I'll go over a little bit of theory, speculation stuff, talking about what I expect to happen in Wano, kind of where I think the arc could or should be heading, things like that. So I'll touch on that a little bit. That said, once I'm also done the chapter review and comments and things regarding that, I also want to touch on a little bit thoughts. I want to touch on a few thoughts regarding some posts I've seen going around, my own personal feelings on everyone kind of talking about the big milestone of One Piece having reached chapter 1000, and how appreciative they are for what the series has meant to them and how grateful they are to Oda and things like that. So I want to kind of put in my own 2 cents on what it's been like to be a part of the One Piece fandom, and things like that. So my thoughts are going to be a little bit more controversial. We'll save those for the end because I feel like I need to get at least some of those out in this video. The rest I'll probably save for the One Piece podcast video when I eventually get around to doing that. So with that said, let us dive into One Piece chapter 1000. Oh, the other reason I held off on the pre-1000 video was because 999 was basically filler. I want to see if there is anything significant that happens in this chapter that'll sway my thoughts one way or the other, or if not, because that might need me to change my theory speculation stuff. But yeah, that's another reason I did it. We'll see what happens. So we start off with the first page of course, the special poster, which is the redo of the one. I think from the beginning of the series, I can't remember what it's from, but redo of the same one with the Straw Hats in their current forms, with all the new Straw Hats and everything. Very shiny, very gold. That's all I got to say about it. So we have Chapter 1000, Straw Hat Luffy by Ichiro Oda, translation by Stephen Paul, lettering by Vanessa Satone. And we see inside the castle, 5th floor, you have this is about the only thing we can do to help, but go ahead. The stairs to the roof are just before you. So you see all the musketeers stand in guard after they've knocked some of the goons out with staircases leading up to the 5th floor as they're all recovering. And you see Shishilian and the zebra-looking mink, I have no idea what his name was, kind of slumped over. Or I think they're kind of bowing to Luffy, maybe. And he goes, "Thanks, Lion Viper." He's like, "It's Shishilian." He's like, "Don't worry, I haven't forgotten. I remember." And Shishilian's like, "Huh?" He's like, "How you guys risked your lives to protect Raizo. Thanks, I'll be back." And you see them kind of just wiping their tears as Luffy goes running up the stairs. And you see, damn, what's with his powers? Is he invincible? And you see King and Queen still trying to attack Marco, not doing any damage to him whatsoever. As you see from the last one, Marco's kind of wrapped his wings around both their necks. And it looks like Queen's got a little, what's that freaking, the, god damn, what word I'm looking for, slinky. He's got like a slinky neck where it's just like separating out. I'll touch on that at the end of the chapter because I have some thoughts regarding that just hit me. We'll get to that at the end. You see, they still grab him around, and Marco's like, "Easy now, easy. Stop freaking out and let the man go." And you see Marco just kicking Zoro up to the roof with a punt, and Zoro's like, "Ah, don't just toss me!" And you see it, as he goes flying through the hole in the roof. You can see back with Momonosuke and Yamato as Momonosuke goes, "D? And this is my father's journal?" He's like, "Honestly, I never truly believed that I would get the chance to meet you. This is for you, of course. I picked it up out of the river at the foot of Oden Castle on that terrible day. Someone must have kept this journal safe from the burning castle. It contains everything there is to know about Oden's grand life and the world he experienced." And you see Shinobu going, "Lord Oden's journal." Momo's like, "Father." And you see again with Law using his room as he's just making his way up to the roof as well, I assume. He goes, "You were born on Whitebeard's ship, weren't you? And then you went on Roger's ship." You see Kid and Killer also rampaging through on their way to the roof. And he goes, "They said that in the future, over 20 years later, the new world here would be overrun by young, powerful new pirates. And that's what's happening now." And Mo was looking all shocked and amazed. And Yamato's like, "I believe that Ace was first and foremost among them. But when he died, I remembered something." And you have an And he's like, "Shoot, that was a slip of the tongue. I wasn't supposed to say that. You didn't hear that. Forget about it." He's like, "Anyway, don't laugh at that. Me and Sabo won't allow it. That's at the end of my little brother's dream." And you have a as Yamato just starts blinking. Oh. And Ace, all drunk, is like, "Sure, when Luffy first said it, we laughed. That's okay. Nobody else can laugh. We believe in him. I really think he can make it happen. And that's why." And you have Yamato go, "Ace." He's like, Yamato just. Oh no, wait, Yamato's holding up the journal for a second. I thought Yamato was just chugging a bunch of sake. And I'm like, all right. But no, Yamato's just like hoisting up the journal. He's like, "Hey, what's the deal, Yamato?" You see Yamato with tears in his eyes being like, "I'm not going to laugh at him." Those are the words the king of the pirates spoke. I'll get to thoughts about that at the end. Words that stunned Oden. In the journal of Kozuki Oden, there was a great man who said the same thing. Of course I wouldn't laugh at him. Your brother is incredible. And Ace is like, "Oh, yeah? It's like a great man, huh? That's good to hear. Maybe one day me and Luffy should sit down with him for a drink." And Yamato's like, "I bet you would have gotten along." It's like, "Would have?" It's like, "Well, he's already dead." It's like, "You're talking about a dead guy?" And then you see there, it's done. This is your Vivre card. With a bam. As he's like, "It's just a piece of paper." It's like, "Yes, but that piece of paper will bring us together again. Tear off a bit of it and give it to your friends you don't want to lose track of or people you want to meet again." And ooh. And you see Yamato holding a piece going, "Let's meet up again one day, Ace." He's like, "You bet." And Yamato goes, and then one day, Ace's card just disappeared. Shortly after that, I learned the truth from the newspaper. I learned that Ace was Roger's son, and his little brother really had made a name for himself as a pirate. You see Luffy running up the stairs and bashing in the door at the top. So that was Luffy, the man you bought here. This is what Oden wrote about the future. And you see up on the roof, Kid Killer, Lazoro, and Law are already there, just kind of facing off against Kaido and Big Mom. Law just kind of casually reclined on a rock with Luffy staring. Kid's like, "And here's another one. All of you stay back and watch me fight." And you have Kaido going, "Straw Hat." And Big Mom goes, "All these fetching young heads, ripe for the taking." And you see as they all line up and Luffy comes to take his place, you have over 20 years in the future, powerful pirates leading the next generation will come swarming into the new world. If I am dead by then, they will be the ones to strike down Kaido. And you have Luffy going, and as he just kind of walks up between Big Mom. And Kaido's like, "Linlin, can you guess what this boy said he would become right to my face?" And Big Mom's like, oh, he's a saucy one. He talked a big game to me too. And he destroyed my castle. You owe me an apology for that, Straw Hat. And you have a tech as he just casually walks in between them. They're like, huh? And you see Zoro just watching as Kaido goes, hey boy, say it again. Tell us what you're going to be right here where we can hear you. And you see he's going behind them to a beaten, bloodied, and bruised Kinemon, who is covered with blood. And he goes, you all right, Kinemon? So, I'm sorry it took me so long. And you have a cough. As he spits up some blood, you see behind him all the other scabbards lying there, also completely beaten and bruised. Except for Kiku, whose sans and arm is looking pretty damn pristine, which looks kind of odd. Like, yeah, there's a little blood spurt next to her face, but other than that, pretty pristine. And you have Kinemon, alas, when I pass on, I have nothing to show Lord Oden but my shame. You have tears streaming down his face as he grips Luffy's coat. And he goes, will you put Wano on your back? He's like, of course I will. It's my friend's country. And you see Kinemon just tears streaming down his face as Kaido comes up behind him and goes, hey boy, and lifts up his club. And he's like, ugh. He's like, Sir Luffy. And Luffy says, Traffy, send them all down below. Paul just lifts his finger and disappears them all down. And Kaido smashes his club down. Luffy jumps into the air. And you have and a zoom as Kaido's blow smashed into the floor and the gifters below. And you have Gear 3, Gum Gum. And you see him thinking back to the Minks going, Raizo is alive and well, and we would never sell a comrade to an enemy. And Momo going, I want to defeat Kaido. And you have Kinemon going, we crossed through time to arrive here from the Wano of 20 years ago. And you have Yasue, the friendly oddball of Abisu Town, shall make the final grand journey. And you have Hyogoro going, the fire of rebellion still burns. The sparks have not gone out. Lord Oden, beloved by all, was taken to the flower capital as a criminal, tried and executed. And you see Kaido just glaring as you see flames just gathering around Luffy's fist as he's getting pissed off, and he smashes into his face with a Gear 3. And he hits him down with the Red Rock and smashes Kaido's face into the ground. And you have Big Mom getting pissed going, Kaido, what are you doing? How could you let him hit you like that? And you see, I am Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm the man who will surpass you to be king of the pirates with a doom. So you have next chapter hits January 17th. All right. So, thoughts? I'll do the usual stuff. Thoughts, from beginning to end regarding the chapter. So I guess to get it out of the way, because I know people are going to be curious, did this chapter live up to the hype? Honestly, it was a decent enough chapter. It was entertaining. It went for the right emotional beats. But if I'm being honest, if it wasn't such a monumental milestone of a chapter, if it wasn't chapter 1000, if there wasn't so much hype and expectations built around it, I think it honestly would be kind of just a mediocre chapter. I don't think there was anything particularly special or touching about it. But we'll get to more concrete overall thoughts once we go through it. So again, like I said, 991 really was a filler to get Luffy up to this moment. It's become super obvious now that this is what Odo's kind of stalling for time for lack of a better word. So I like that he's kind of acknowledging, the Minks, what the Minks have done to get him to this point. I like that he's acknowledging their sacrifice and their efforts, and the fact that he's going to repay them for, having stalled up until this point. But I do have some, kind of caveats to add to that. We'll get to that at the end. The Queen being a cyborg thing, I was kind of wondering if that was going to come back, because I think last week I kind of speculated, it'd be really kind of interesting or nice to see Chopper and Frankie teaming up to take out Queen, given that, Chopper's doctoring skills with Queen's doing the virus and things, and Frankie kind of being a tinkerer inventor, and with Queen being now also a cyborg tinkerer inventor. I would like, I would still would like to see that kind of come into play. Stick on to best manga chapter ever. See, my controversial opinion is going to be this wasn't even the best chapter in Wano, and I honestly liked it more when Kaido shot down Luffy than Luffy shot down Kaido. And I'm going to get so much hate for saying that, but that ties into thoughts I have. We'll get to at the end. But yeah, I'll get into that. So Queen being a cyborg, like I really hope we do get to see him get reestablished as a threat because I had so many ideas about how this arc could go. Like now the Queen's a cyborg dinosaur. Back in 2018, I wrote an editorial with my theories, speculations on Wano, and I kind of jokingly was like, "Ha ha! What if Frankie helped X Drake become, Mecha X Drake? We have a cyborg dinosaur. Why can't we get some more in there?" I'm just saying, Mecha X Drake is now a legitimate possibility. It would be pretty awesome to see a mech armored dinosaur. Just saying. So we'll see if anything happens. I wonder though if that's why Oda potentially paired up Frankie with Who's Who and feel that's why he's part of the armored division. Apart from him being a Triceratops, I wonder if he's also a potential hidden cyborg. But that's getting too much into it. Yeah, nothing much to say about Marco just tossing up Zoro without kind of any dignity, just punting him up into the hole. That was amusing. The journal thing is one of those cases where I'm like, either Momo is going to read it, and if he tries to tell Luffy anything, Luffy's going to react to how he did to Raleigh and be like, no, I don't want to know anything about Oden's adventure. I don't want to know anything about D. I want to have a fun adventure. I want to find the stuff out for myself. And Oda's just going to tease it and have like Momo or Yamato say something, ominous and like predicting the future and being like, oh, one day blah, blah, blah will happen or something like that. I just don't care for teases like this where it's like, mystery journal's got all the answers, because given Oda's track record, there's very slim chance he's actually going to have the journal give us any answers. It would be nice if he did. It'd be nice if he just like, even if after Luffy walks away, right, we somehow get, the reveal of what the D stands for or something else, just to give, the readers a little bit of a Scooby Snack kind of tempt and entice us a little bit. It would be nice if he did, but given Oda's modus operandi, I highly doubt we're going to get any of that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to the journal, whether it's going to get burnt up, destroyed, whatever, but that's neither here or there. Which brings me to the Ace Yamato stuff, and like Oda's again kind of cock teasing the, Luffy said something, it's going to make people laugh at him. But people kind of being like inspired by that. Again, like there's always been a prominent theory in the fandom that, Luffy is Roger's reincarnation, or that, Luffy is Roger 2.0, and that, what if Roger had the gum 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 fruit first, things like that. I don't really care for that kind of story. I don't care for, the whole chosen one and their destiny and all that kind of stuff. I think it's overdone. And that's always been a concern of mine with the way Oda's been handling Luffy, being like, he's related to this legendary revolutionary. He's got this super, comes from this notable bloodline, things like that. It kind of really does go against the larger theme of the series of this idea of freedom, meet people being free to be able to make their own choices and their own decisions and things like that. So to be like, no, he's got a chosen path. No, this is destiny ahead of him isn't a line I really, really care for. And more to the point, I think the other big problem I have with, Luffy and Roger are like, basically the same person except in different generations, is it kind of seems to imply that the reason Roger was never able to change the world the way Luffy's going to is just because, he had a disease and he, that he just ran out of time to be able to do what he was going to do, and not that there was, a marked difference in their personalities or their approach to, piracy or something. Like there's no distinguishing reason why Luffy's going to be the one to change the world. When Roger couldn't, when Joy Boy couldn't, when all these people that came before him couldn't. What's the one reason why Luffy's going to be able to do what he hasn't been able to do so far? And so far, the justification seems to be that, well, Luffy's very charismatic. He draws people to him. People like him. They like bonding with him, all that. Like, he's super friendly. He's like, yeah, but people also said the same things about Roger as well. Like, we kind of get this sanitized version of Roger where, everyone's like, oh, yeah, he was a little bit childish and impulsive and angry, but no, he's still such a good guy, he was doing the right thing. Like, and then we kind of just gloss over, like, the more nuanced versions of Roger we could have, the part where Roger, killed an entire kingdom's army for making fun of his friends, or the one that killed all of Squart's crew. Like, we never really touch on the flaws and the nuances of these idealized heroes in this series. And so I'm just kind of waiting for Oda to kind of at least acknowledge that, even if not really go in depth into it, and kind of explore the reason why Luffy is so different apart from, just generic charisma. And I feel like if he just told us what this speech was, what this dream was, it would do a lot more to kind of massage that feeling of, like, that feeling like Luffy is not particularly distinctive, and he's kind of just been, he's kind of just expected to be the Pirate King just because of destiny, and just because, everyone else is just assholes, and like he's one of the good guys, and that's kind of the sole reason up to this point we're kind of cheering for him. But thoughts on that when we get to the little part at the end about the Pirate King. So yeah, honestly, like, I really wish, like, Oda's gonna really push this 5-year timeline. I really want to start sprinkling some of these answers in earlier, rather than trying to like backload all of them. Just be like, oh, I'm just gonna have 5 chapters full of, like, condensed information about every single mystery in the series. Like, put it in like little breadcrumbs throughout the series that people keep wanting to find out more, rather than just getting annoyed by being like putting a bread or doing the dollar trick where tie a string to a dollar and then jerk it out when people reach for it. Like, that's what Oda's doing with this bullshit. But I guess it's working, so I guess I'm just the sole outlier not liking it. With that said, Fever card. So I wonder if once Wano's ends, we're gonna find out how they make Fever cards, because my brain is telling me that they use your fingernail as like your DNA or something to make a Fever card. Because we know Sabo bought like a portable machine or something to do that back on Dressrosa for Luffy. So I don't think it's going to be like a particularly complex maneuver. But I wonder if we're going to find out about that at some point. Which comes to the other point, like, Oda's really, really, really doing his best to kind of insinuate Yamato for Nakama, like with pushing the whole relationship with Luffy, with Ace talking about how much, Yamato idolizes Luffy and everything else. Like, Oda really wants to insinuate that Yamato is potential next Nakama. I'm on two minds. I'm like, yeah, I like Yamato enough that I wouldn't mind him joining the crew over, say, someone like Carrot, who, despite being there for 3 arcs, does not stand out in any regard. So Yamato would be a vast improvement over that. That said, the feeling I got from this specifically is it feels like Yamato's either going to go sailing by himself after Wano ends and joins the Grand Fleet, or he's going to form his own crew. Because it almost feels like, Luffy's going to give Yamato his Viver card, and then they're going to meet up at some point at the end. But that's just speculation. Still too early to tell what's going to go on. So, I forgot, kind of glossed over this, but yeah, so a lot of people were speculating, like, oh, who are the 9 shadows that Toki was talking about that are going to come back, and take down Kaido? A lot of people were like, oh, it's going to be the Scabbards. Like, oh, no, wait, there's 9 Straw Hats. It's going to be the Straw Hats. Now the insinuation seems to be that it's going to be the supernovas, because if you take out the two kind of vice captains, which is Killer and Zoro, there's 9 supernova captains. So I wonder if the insinuation for this is that all 9 of them are going to be necessary in order to be able to take down Kaido. But again, that relates to final thoughts I'll have at the end. But like, this is the thing, like, this wasn't a huge surprise because I predicted like a couple of chapters ago that we were going to see Kid Killer face off against Big Mom and Zoro Luffy face off against Kaido. Law was kind of the wild card, in which I didn't know whether he was going to be. Let's see for a second. Wait, yeah. That's something I'm not going to deal with right now. But yeah, Law was kind of the wild card, which I didn't know fully what his role is going to be, whether he's going to participate or not. I suspect he'll probably still hang back and play a support role in this. So I suspect he'll do his teleportation things to kind of make things a little bit more awkward for the Emperors and kind of land in surprise blows and things like that. Which brings me to Luffy walking in between, Kaido and Big Mom, casually without a care. I know people probably freaking out about this and like how badass it was and how cool it was and everything. Yeah, it's badass. Yeah, it's a great moment. Callbacks to when, similar to when Luffy did this to Hody back in Fishman Island, when he was walking straight and you had like the support of the other, or if Zoro and Sanji kind of like, backing off my captain. I don't know if I'd quantify this as a leadership moment or, like a mature moment or anything like that. Yeah, it's badass. Yeah, it's fine. But I think the thing that doesn't stick with me for this is the emotional throughput, or like the resonance that Oda's trying to build with Kinemon and the other retainers. Because like Kinemon was basically the Vivi of this arc, a character they met in a previous arc that kind of traveled with them in the ship to various other islands before, the Straw Hats came to their homeland to kind of help them out with the conflict there. Except the difference between, Vivi traveling with the Straw Hats versus Kinemon traveling with the Straw Hats is Vivi had, tangible moments with the crew where she was interacting and bonding with them and building up the personal rapport and the personal relationships, which meant that when we finally did get to Alabasta and we finally got to the full scope and scale of the conflict there, and when you do have, the things like them drawing the X's on their arms, and moments like when Luffy faces off against Crocodile and tells him, you're looking down on Luffy or on Vivi because she's not powerful, but she's got a big heart, she's compassionate. That's where her strength lies. Like that's what makes her special. That's why people love her so much. We don't really have any of that with Kinemon. Like Kinemon never really built up a rapport with any of the Straw Hats to any significant extent, despite the fact, he was there with them on Punk Hazard. He was there with them on Zoe. He was there with them in and out kind of on Dressrosa. And then, now they come to Wano. And like, this is kind of like a problem I've repeatedly harped on with Wano in general. It's like Oda's kind of trying to fast track these emotional connections and relationships, and it doesn't work by just trying to gloss over and be like, yeah, we're just building a relationship without showing, the characters actually bonding, learning, interacting, things like that. So for Luffy to be like, oh, Kinemon, my guy, this guy I care so much about, kind of falls flat because I can't remember any significant kind of moment that Luffy actually shared with Kinemon that would justify, this kind of emotional response to seeing him beaten and bloodied like this. Like, one of the most prominent moments, like in the series, is when Vivi, tells Luffy off when she gets shot when they're on Drum, and Luffy's trying to be antagonistic and trying to rile up, Dalton and the others by being like, oh, you're gonna let me through no matter what. I'm not gonna take your shit. and Vivi has to tell him, like, no, this is not how a captain acts. This is not how a leader acts. That is a kind of a visceral moment, kind of lingers on in your memory, kind of justifies the powerful emotional connection in a way that the stuff on Wano really hasn't, because Oda rushed it. Same with like Kinemon crying about like Oden and like how he's let him down. Again, this is something I touched on when we we're going through the flashback. We had literally like one or two panels of the Scabbards meeting Oden, and then somehow deciding that this man's like overwhelming charisma that we're never really privy to somehow made him so great, like so worthy of respect, that they're gonna like follow him to the ends of the earth. And we're trying to like justify, but trying to like repeatedly say like, yeah, Odin's awesome. Oh, everyone loves him. Like, oh, look at how awesome he is. Look at how much everyone loves him. Doesn't really work for the reader if you're telling them how they should feel rather than showing them how they should feel. So that's why a lot of this is like, yeah, I get what beats Oda is trying to go for, but it's kind of like the Three Little Pigs, building up the House of Straw and everything. Like, the structure on which it's built is so tenuous that it's so easy to blow down, and there's no emotional impact to it. So I wish Oda had spent even like 2 or 3 chapters more in the flashback, just kind of developing Oden's relationship with the Scabbards, because it would have paid off exponentially in moments like this where he's trying to what's the word I'm looking for? Well, he's trying to tap into that emotional core of the arc in the series, and trying to get us more invested in seeing Kaido go down. Because right now, to the point where we're at, it's like, yeah, Luffy punching Kaido, it's like, yeah, it's cool, it's badass, it's nice to see him, kind of trying to prove his mettle, prove his worth and everything. But I'm not particularly invested in seeing Kaido go down. Like, there's no catharsis in seeing Kaido get beaten down, because he's been up to this point kind of just such a bland enemy, because he's been so hands off this entire arc. He's been like, yeah, I do torture and kidnapping, and I'm making people slaves for me, but there's no sense of like disdain for him for doing any of those things, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I'll get kind of confusing thoughts here, but I'll get to that. That said, Oda, at least I will say, did a good job with the emotional montage. This is one of the moments I least liked in this chapter. He did pick, apart from the Kinemon moments, which still suck, he did pick some of the more emotionally resonant ones from the past few arcs. The Raizo is alive and well, and we never saw the comrade to an enemy is still one of the best parts of Zou. Still has a strong emotional core and strong kind of nostalgia for that moment. So that one was good. The I Wanted to Defeat Kaido one, again, is also a good moment, because that's one of the few times that we've actually seen any kind of nuance or dimension to Momonosuke's character. Because up to that point, he was like a shitty little kid who was trying to act tough and was a pervert, was kind of just the two core kind of qualities he had. So seeing him actually act like a little kid was one of the more emotionally resonant and powerful moments. Same with Yasue. Again, I think I mentioned it when I did my original review for that. Definitely one of the stronger emotional moments of Wano. So good choices there. I like seeing Luffy now bring... See, this is the other thing where I'm going to be like a little bit nitpicky with it. Because Red Rock is obviously a Gear 3rd attack. It's supposed to be, greater version of Red Hawk. The Rock being, giant mythical bird from Middle Eastern mythology. So it's all... I don't know if this was an attack Luffy just came up with or developed in this 2 weeks when he was training, or if this was something he had kind of in his back pocket. I think that's kind of the nitpicky thing where I'm like, all right, if this is an attack he's been kind of holding back, why wouldn't you have used it against like Doflamingo or someone else where you're kind of struggling against? It's one of those nitpicks where I'm like, all right, Oda trying to hold back stuff just for, the sake of surprise and all that annoys me a little bit, but whatever. And then of course we get the whole, I Monkey Do Luffy. and I'm the man who'll surpass you, the king of the power. So this is the moment I kind of want to touch upon. Quickly go into comments before I get into this. So Prince G says, I feel like Oda's done a poor job of progressing the strength of these characters, specifically the Zoro and Killer. Oda hasn't even shown that they can beat a commander. Even with all the training Luffy's done, these guys should get wrecked by Big Mom Kaido. Let me touch on that quickly before I digress into Luffy stuff, because that is an excellent point and something I want to touch upon. Because this is, again, something that's kind of bugged me with how the fans have been kind of reacting to the series post-time skip. During those 2 years, where Luffy's learning hockey and everything, it's like, yeah, like, I'll give credit to Raleigh. Raleigh did mention, like, he does have kind of a natural instinct for picking this up, and he learned the basics of hockey in a year and a half. So, all right, like, yeah, Luffy is a combat genius, so to an extent, yes, it makes sense that he's going to be picking up these techniques and skills much faster than a normal pirate would at, his kind of level of development, whatever. That's fine. But ever since then, like, it took him a year and a half to learn the basics of hockey. And yet, as soon as he starts fighting in the New World, even with, the bullshit excuse Oda's doing of like, oh, well, hockey blooms in battle, this is something I didn't like about the Katakuri fights. The Katakuri has honed his skills after, like, years and years and years and years, would presume, being an Emperor's crew, of surviving in the New World against, pirates that are as powerful or more powerful than he is. And Luffy walks in after having trouble taking down Cracker, who he wouldn't have taken down without Nami's help because his hockey wasn't strong enough. But somehow he's able to outpace Katakuri's skills in Future Sight hockey in the span of one fight. And then after that, he's something like, oh yeah, Future Sight's no problem. I can just pull it out whenever. Like, I feel like this is the problem with where Oda's going. He's like, oh shit, I can't do, another time skip or things like that. So he has to kind of like artificially speed up Luffy's growth. He's like, oh, I have to make it believable that he could fight these guys and win, and he has to be, powerful enough to do it. Which brings me to, Wano and Kaido and Big Mom and all that. As soon as Luffy learned the Rio Hawk, they're like, oh yeah, this is how he's going to take down Kaido. He's just going to punch him, and he's going to defeat him. He's going to go get past the scales. Because a lot of people are seeming to be assuming that, Kaido's toughness comes from him being a dragon. This is way back then. I don't know if their minds have changed or what new rationales they come up with. But everyone kind of went off the assumption that Kaido was an actual biological dragon and that his scales, were what made him so tough and hard to kill. And that's why he's never been able to execute it, like all the swords and everything broke on him. It was because the scales were so tough they were never able to penetrate it. And they're like, oh, now that Luffy has this, special hockey, he can just bypass the scales and destroy him from inside. Like, oh, this is how he'll take down Kaido. And to me, it's like, so the assumption is that these two emperors, who are super powerful, who have been living in the New World for how many years, who have probably seen, significant challenges to their authority, never bothered to learn about this advanced type of hockey, or like never came up against this advanced type of hockey like ever in their entire reign. Like, they never bothered to learn about Rio, like how to use advanced hockey at any point. Like, it feels like there's a disconnect there, being like, all right, just because Luffy's now kind of like, so like the best metaphor example I can come up with is, all right, like, let's say it's, a track and field race. All right. Kaido and Big Mom are like, all right, they've got a head start. They're 100 meters out from behind, in front of everyone, and all the supernovas are still back to the starting line. And then after, say 5 minutes after they've gotten a certain distance ahead, then the supernovas will let go. And now they're trying to play catch up to the Emperors. But the Emperors are still moving. Like, yeah, the supernovas are closing the gap and getting closer and closer to them in terms of, power levels and power scaling and all that. But they're still ahead of them, in terms of expertise, strength, and things like that. So yeah, like Luffy learning Rio gets him up a little bit closer to their level. But I don't think it gives him like a huge, significant advantage, which will now be like, oh, now I'm just going to be able to pwn them so easily. Like, oh yeah, just a few punches and things, stuff like that. So I don't know. Like, I feel like Oda definitely does play fast and loose with his power level and power scaling. And I feel like the moment he introduced hockey, it kind of got worse because with Devil Fruits, at least you could kind of circumvent that with, the creativity and the uses of Devil Fruits being like, work smart, not hard, basically. With Devil Fruits, it was work smart, not hard. And even if someone had an advantage over you, say Logia users, whatever, you could find some way to kind of level the playing field, and make it easier for you to hit them. But as soon as he introduced hockey, it's now just become a case of like, all right, who can hit harder and stronger? And that's really what honestly determines most of the fights is, all right, can I hit harder than the other guy? And it's really kind of taken a lot of the creativity out of it. I'm hoping we'll see an eventual return to that at some point, but I don't know. That's it. Back to my little digression about Luffy and kind of like, who I'll be the man to surpass the King of the Pirates. So there is a storytelling, what's the best way to word, like storytelling technique called the Hollywood formula, which when I heard about it in this writing podcast called Writing Excuses, kind of sparked a light bulb in my head because of how well I felt like it applies to One Piece specifically, especially a lot of the early East Blue stuff and like stuff before the time skip. So brief digression before I get back in this, I swear it's relevant to what I'm going to talk about. So basically what this formula says is that in the story, there are three major important characters. There is the protagonist, there's the relationship character or the dynamic character, and there's the antagonist. The protagonist, of course, being the hero of the story, and they are a person that wants something, and they want something concrete. So it's going to be something concrete like, oh, I want to rob a bank so I can make millions of dollars, or I want to win the love of my life back so I can marry her, something like that. Like they will have a concrete goal that they want to achieve. The antagonist is not the villain, but the person that's putting obstacles into the path of the protagonist to try to stop them from achieving their goal. So for the guy that wants to rob the millions of dollars, he's the casino guy that has an impenetrable vault that no one can get through. For the person you want to get married to, she's marrying a huge, controlling, abusive dick, and he's going to stop her from, marrying the other guy with threats of violence, something like that. Bad examples, but I think you get the point. And the relationship or the dynamic character is the one that the protagonist has a relationship to, who kind of embodies the theme or the larger arc of the story. And the great example that was used in this episode to kind of best describe this was the story of the Dark Knight, the Christopher Nolan movie with Batman. So in that one, Batman is the protagonist because he wants to give up being the Batman so that, he can live a normal life with Rachel. He doesn't have to be vigilante anymore. He can just be, he can pass off the responsibilities. Antagonist, a lot of people want to think it's the Joker because the Joker's obviously the one preventing him from doing that. But as was pointed out to me, the antagonist is actually Harvey Dent or Two-Face. And the reason that is the case is because Bruce is trying to pin all his hopes of a normal life on Harvey Dent, who he wants to be the White Knight, the one that will clean up Gotham for him so that Batman can stop being Batman. But Harvey keeps letting Batman down because he keeps doing, semi-illegal things or taking the shortcut rather than trying to do things the proper way. And so Batman has to kind of keep interfering to make sure that, Harvey doesn't get called out for all the shit he's doing. And the Joker is the relationship character because the thing he tells to Batman is that, you can't pretend that you're one of them. You're not. You're like me. You're a freak. And the way that Batman reconciles with the Joker is at the end when the Joker asks him, like, do you know how I got these scars? Batman finally responds to the joke and says, no, but I know how you got these ones. And then he shoots him in the mouth with the little batarangs before he escapes. And the reason that was the reconciliation is the end of The Dark Knight has Batman accepting and acknowledging the fact that he never can have a normal life and that he always will be, the outsider, the Dark Knight versus the White Knight, the one who always has to live in shadow, and that's kind of the role he has to occupy, in this world. And the reason that stuck with me so well is like, all right, if you think about East Blue One Piece, like perfect arc to describe this with is Arlong Park. Protagonist of that story is Nami. Like Luffy's the protagonist of One Piece overall as a story, sure, but the protagonist of Arlong Park specifically is Nami. The antagonist of Arlong Park specifically is Arlong. Nami's goal is to free her village from Arlong's control, buy them back with 100,000 berries or something like that. That is her concrete goal. She has to gather so much money so that she can buy back her village. Arlong is the antagonist and also the villain in this case, occupying kind of both roles, because he constantly is trying to find ways to make sure that Nami can never gather enough money to buy back the village so that she'll stay in his crew and be his navigator forever, which is why he brings in the corrupt marine to, steal her money and take it away, because then she can't say that he did anything about it. It's out of his hands. And the relationship character in that is Luffy. And the moment that the reconciliation happens and the overall broad reaching theme of the arc is the moment where Luffy puts his hat on Nami, and she asks for his help and says, Luffy, help, please help me. Because one of the broader themes of the East Blue is the idea of people have treasure that they want to protect, it's important to them. And the reason that moment with Nami Luffy is so resonant and speaks so well is because Nami's treasure is her village and she'll do anything to protect it. Luffy's treasure up to that point has been his hat, something he has not been willing to let anyone actually touch or handle. And at that moment where he puts his hat on Nami, as an acknowledgement of him saying, it's okay to rely on other people to help you protect your treasure, because you can't do everything alone. Because up to that point, Nami has been trying, to do the entire struggle by herself. She's trying to do this alone without involving anyone else. And Luffy's the one that has to tell her, no, that's not possible. You can't do everything by yourself. It's okay to rely on other people, right? And I think the reason I bring this up specifically is a lot of the reason I think that Luffy can get away without really having developed or changed, and the reason a lot of people seem to think that that's the way it has to be, and that the series is about Luffy inspiring others, is that it works for early parts of the series where Luffy, the focus isn't on Luffy, and he has this ensemble cast around him to kind of take the weight off of him. So you're seeing the ensemble cast, all the Straw Hats growing and developing as they meet Luffy, which means that Luffy himself as a character doesn't really need to change and grow at that point in the story, because that's not really his role in the story at that point. His role in the story at that point is about being the relationship character and kind of inspiring others to grow and change, kind of achieve their goals. The problem we have once we get to the post-time skip is that now Luffy has become the protagonist. We can kind of debate what the antagonist is. People would want to say Blackbeard, but I say the world government is the antagonist at this point. But the problem is, Luffy as a protagonist, like his goal is semi-tangible in that, yes, I want to be the Pirate King. But we don't really know the but why part of that. It's like, yes, it's like saying, yes, I want $1 million. All right, fine, you want $1 million, but why do you want the $1 million? Luffy wants to be the Pirate King, but why does he want to be the Pirate King? And I think that's the part of this why it doesn't resonate with me, with him constantly saying, I want to be Pirate King, I want to be Pirate King. It's like, oh, I want to be Pirate King. It's like, yeah, cool, fine, bro, but why am I rooting for you to become the Pirate King? And a lot of it feels like, it's just because we like Luffy as a character and we want to see him succeed. We want to see him achieve his goal. So it feels like, by proxy, we're like, yeah, just because it is his goal, that's why we're rooting so hard for him to be the Pirate King. But the problem is that, with this overarching story, there isn't really Like this is the problem with like Luffy's dream and everything. Like it doesn't really tie into the overarching story well. Like Oda bought up a really, really good kind of concrete idea back in Luffy's flashback of the idea of like, Luffy wants to be strong enough so that he never loses anyone ever again. And the reason he did that was because he lost Sabo to the Great Terminal, to the nobles, to whatever. And Dadan's the one that points out, Ace and Wasteland Luffy are like enraged and like, oh, I'm gonna go beat down Blue Jones. I'm gonna go beat down these guys. And Dadan points out, you keep saying that you're gonna beat these people down. You keep saying you're gonna change the world. How are you gonna do that? At where you're at now? Like the world, you think your enemy is someone tangible. The world is what was Sabo's enemy. And how are you going to change that the way you are right now? If you want to do something, you need to be someone that becomes powerful enough, to change the world, to change the systems, if you never want something like this to happen again. And the thing with that, like, with what Luffy's been doing so far, is he hasn't really acknowledged that there are systemic issues to how the world is structured, and he hasn't really done anything to change overall the systems that are holding the world in place right now. Kind of even built a new world that you could potentially imagine. And the big problem with most of the post time skip stuff is Luffy's still operating within the same system, the same framework that Roger and everyone else did before him, where he's going into places, he's finding new territory, and he's going to be like, oh, I'm going to put it under my protection. But beyond that, what is he going to actually do to change the world, to overturn these systems? And I think that's a key part of becoming the Pirate King, the role of the Pirate King that needs to be kind of acknowledged in this. Like I have so many ideas regarding this, but I don't think I get into the nuances of in this video because it just would take too much time. There's too many disparate threads. But I think we need to get to a point eventually where Luffy considers, or at least thinks about, what he wants to change and how he's going to change it and how he's going to overhaul these different systems. Which kind of brings me, I guess, to my, if I had to take like a best guess at what is Luffy saying, that sounds so ridiculous or so overblown or whatever. I think the best clue would be in the flashback where he says, like, I'd never want to lose anyone again. And what he thought of, when he's back in Fishman Island, he said, I want to be strong enough so I never lose anyone again. I think that's what his goal or dream is. That sounds ridiculous. It's like, I want to protect everyone. I think that's what it's going to be. And I think that ties into the Pirate King's kind of like the need, or at least the desire to become Pirate King, is because the Pirate King is the most powerful person in the world. And if you're the most powerful person in the world, then no one would dare try to fight you or step on you or do things like that. And if you have that much power, then you should be able to protect everyone and everything you care about. I think that's my best guess. But I might eventually end up doing a video on that with my full concrete thoughts. But I wish Oda would just stop with the teasing, because this idea that mystery, you can't reveal everything. You have to kind of like just keep like what the fuck is the word I'm looking for? You have to kind of keep leading people on. Does not work, because even if you do reveal whatever this is, like it just leads to more speculation, more interest, and not less, in my opinion. But yeah, we'll see. That said, decent enough chapter, but yeah, I think it was mediocre best. Now we'll get into kind of thoughts, speculations about the direction Wano's going from here. I am still going to be a contrarian just because I am, and say that I still feel like Luffy needs to get shot down. Because in Wano so far, we haven't really gotten a moment like we did in Enies Lobby, where Robin was taken away, Straw Hats were all defeated and powerless, and they couldn't do anything. We haven't had one like in Alabasta, where Luffy gets thrown into the pool. They have to fight off everyone while they're trying to smash the concrete. We haven't had any of the ones like in Alabasta, where Luffy got defeated by Crocodile, sucked into the sand pit, where he lost 3 times before he was able to finally do that. I feel like we need to get a moment like that, a moment of great loss before they kind of get to the victory, which again is also a part of the broader theory of the Hollywood formula I talked about earlier, but I'm not going to get into that there. This looks like I need Zex to jump into OP for a while, start a crew with Yamato. Now that would be interesting. Please, I would kill for Zex to come into One Piece and just take Zoro's place. Like, vastly more interesting, kind of like the same kind of dynamic, like, what makes a warrior. Zex is vastly more interesting, where Zoro's like, oh, I gotta cut shit. I gotta cut bigger shit now. But that said, what direction do I think this arc is going to take? I want to talk about the end of the arc before kind of backtracking a little bit to the current stuff. I know a lot of people are being like, oh, there's going to be a big feast at the end of Wano, like to celebrate Jinbei because he never got a proper feast and everything like that. I don't think that Wano can have a happy celebratory ending unless it's kind of akin to Dressrosa, where they have a small break where people are able to rest, recuperate, celebrate a little bit before things start going south again. But I don't think Wano can just have a happy ending where Kaido's defeated, the ogre is taken down, there's a big feast everyone throws, everyone's celebrating, and the Straw Hats sail off to their next grand adventure. I don't think that's a possibility for a couple of reasons. The first and biggest one, of course, being that Big Mom's presence in the arc kind of complicates that. Unless we get a super shitty Olin moment again, where Big Mom bonks her head, turns good again, joins the Straw Hat side, and at the end of the arc, she bonks her head again, turns back into Big Mom once the conflict's all done, Kaido's taken down, which would be super shitty storytelling in my opinion. I don't think that would work unless Big Mom either betrays Kaido or gets knocked out of the picture. I cannot see a happy ending with Wano and the Citizens where it's just like, oh yeah, we're partying, and Big Mom's kind of like, oh, I'll get you next time, Straw Hat. She's sailing off. Like, I don't see that happening. I don't think I could buy Big Mom just being like, yeah, I'm just gonna sail off somewhere else. And like, no, like I feel like Oda bought her here to Wano, so that it's easier for him to write in a plot line where she follows the Straw Hats to Elbaf to the next island where she concludes her story. I know a lot of people are also speculating Big Mom's going to be taken out in Wano, like this is going to be the arc of 2 emperors being taken down. I don't buy it. I think Big Mom still has to go back to Elbaf, resolve her arc there, and that's where she'll get taken down. I don't think it makes sense to have her taken down in Wano itself. So that's one kind of outstanding reason why I don't think it's going to happen. Second is all the various, outstanding factions, parties, all that have an interest in Wano, that haven't really. This is like Toji, who's an actual dashing gentleman, can take Shichi's place. Please, like, if we're leaving Wano, I'm fully in support of Shichi just being left behind and Yamato sneaking on board, or just Yamato sneaking on board. We just forget Shichi ever existed. Just forget he ever existed in the entire series. Just leave him alone. Back to my point. So, here's the thing. Like, we know that the Marines have some kind of interest in Wano. And tangentially to that, the world government has some kind of interest in Wano. As Gyakumaru, the transforming Onimaru the Fox, pointed out, Wano was known as the Land of Gold how many ever years ago. And during Rubbery, when the kings and queens were talking about, the various going-ons, they specifically mentioned and pointed out that, the military Marines don't run on empty air, that they need funds to, supply the military with to keep the Marines running. And they pointed out, hey, does Wano even count as an actual nation? Isn't it just a rogue of isn't it like an uncivilized nation? Then we have the whole mystery with the revolutionaries pointing out that the metal in the guns that they stole from Doflamingo, manufactured on Wano, shipped by Kaido to him, are made of a very specific and rare metal called, what is it, drunken iron ore? Again, that's a dangling plot thread that's been kind of left unresolved. I think I mentioned in my last speculation video when I did the first one that it's not confirmed, but Blackbeard might have potentially made off with said weapons. And so, yeah, it might be, the thing being like, oh, if the Marines won't take it, then I will. It's him being like, I'm going to go take over Wano so that I can get, take care, control these factories so I can build my own weapons cache. So that's the other potential interest in the parties. And then, of course, we have CP0, again, who Orochi kind of backtalked. And we still have not got confirmation of whether they have given him his battleship or not. So that's the other potential interest. And the last one, kind of related to Blackbeard as well, is Gecko Moria is still alive. He has history with Kaido. I can't see him coming in after Kaido's been defeated and then being like, oh, ha, 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 Kaido, ha, ha, how does it feel to be defeated? I don't see it working like that. It makes more sense to me thematically just to have Gecko Moria be involved in taking Kaido down. So this is kind of the speculation part. I'm like, yeah, it seems like at this point it's a little bit too late to bring in, new characters, new conflicts and stuff into the series. But I feel like there's still a bunch of outside forces that are having interest in Wano, and it wouldn't really make sense for them to show up after the conflict's done, after Wano's opened up its borders, for then people to start moving in, and it's sort of like a whole second conflict. So that's another reason I feel like, the arc can't really end on a positive note like that. What else is there? Oh, I'm trying to think what else. Oh, and the last kind of one, this is a little bit more speculative as well, is that Oda's been kind of hinting at the fact that, the story is kind of heading towards its climax. That people are starting to move. Like the latest Jump Fest, he said, like, oh, Shanks is starting to move. Shanks is starting to move. Blackbeard's on the move as well. And, like, things are going to start changing. So if that's the case, I feel like there has to be a tonal shift in the manga where things actually do start, the overall plot starts progressing. So I feel like if that's going to be the case, and if Wano really is going to be a linchpin for that, then I feel like this is going to have to be the start of that kind of tonal shift where we start, don't having the happy-go-lucky like endings and stuff anymore. We're starting to get like the bigger world conflicts with all these different forces starting to move as war is starting to happen. So I feel like that's another reason this arc can't just end with no everyone happy party run off. But it's still too early to kind of tell if any of that's going to actually happen or if things are going to change like that. So I'm going to kind of hold back on it for now, while maintaining the idea that the raid has to fail and things have to change. And the one big thing I'll kind of mention as being like, if Oda did not touch on this in any regard, that I feel like would be poor storytelling, or feel like if Oda ditched this particular plot point, then I feel like he'd be rushing the story and there'd be legitimate concern for the quality of it going forward. And that's the whole Cursed Sword storyline. Because this is the one thing where I'm like, I don't like to give Oda more credit than is due. This is the one thing where I kind of will give him a little bit of credit. Now, the Cursed Sword thing was first mentioned back in Logtown, chapter 100, with Ippon Matsu kind of mentioned, like, oh, the Sandai was it? Fuck, I can't even remember. Was the Sandai Kitetsu? Yeah, Sandai Kitetsu has a curse on it. It's led many swordsmen to their death, and Zoro does this whole cool thing like, oh, let's see what your strongest curse or my luck. And so we had that. Then on Whiskey Peak, Zoro kind of mentions like, oh, the sword has a personality of its own. You know, it cuts what the wielder doesn't want it to cut, etc., etc. Then again on, I'm probably missing some other ones where it came into, was like mentioned, but these are the ones I can remember off the top of my head. Then Water 7, same thing, where Chopper brings the sword so Zoro can cut himself out of the chimney. Zoro again mentions like, oh, hey, do you have Sanda Kitetsu with you? And Zoro's like, yeah. Zoro. Chopper's like, yeah, why? And he's like, oh, I can just sense the sword. There's something off about it. Right, again. And then again on Wano, we've had that now brought up several times with Hitetsu mentioning to Luffy, like, hey, that sword is cursed. You know, I don't want to touch it without reverence. If you take it, bad things will happen to you. And ends up happening? Bad things happen to Luffy and to Tama, both who are in close proximity to the sword at some point. And then when Zoro gets Enma, he mentions the same thing. It's like, oh, you know, the sword has a will of its own that exudes its wielder's haki by itself. And, you know, it takes a powerful swordsman to control it. So the fact that, you know, for over 900 chapters, Oda's been kind of dropping hints or at least callbacks to this idea that, yes, there is something about cursed swords. You know, there is something to them one way or another. Feels like he is eventually leading to bringing it up or at least addressing it in some way, especially in Wano. Again, I kind of talked about it in detail with the whole Ringo Swordsman, you know, the swords being the part of their soul and everything in my previous video. So I won't get into too much detail about that. But I feel like we have to see some kind of conclusion or closure to that in the story in Wano. And I don't know how we get that if the conflict is going to end here. It'd feel kind of weird if after the conflict's over, like Hitetsu and Zoro just sit down and is like, hey, what's the deal with cursed swords? Hitetsu's like, oh, let me just tell you the story right now. What cursed swords are like. Yeah, it's no big deal. Like, it feels kind of weird to just leave that as a dangling thread. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm still hoping that the cursed sword is going to play some role in Zoro being taken out. I guess I should talk about this before I talk about that. So is because Kaido, I think in the last chapter confirmed basically that he's going to go drop the Onigashima right on the Flower Capital. Doesn't matter if he kills people, like it's a loss he's willing to take. So is that going to be, you know, the birdcage of this arc? I still don't think so. I still think that the arc will end once the sun rises on Wano, especially given, you know, the whole dawn references. Like, it makes just a lot of thematic sense for the literal breaking of the dawn, you know, the end of the fire festival to signal the actual defeat of Kaido. So I still think that's going to be the actual birdcage. But that brings up the question of what's going to happen to the island. I'm still going to say I'm of the mind that Zoro is going to at least cut a chunk of it off. Whether it's going to be cut in half or just going to cut off the edges, whatever. I feel like Zoro is going to play a small role in that. The other kind of idea I had with regards to who else could do that is Orochi, because we know he's not dead. We know he's owed a battleship, and we know he's not going to let Kaido, you know, drop Onigashima on the Flower Capital and destroy citizens. He's not going to let him do any of those things. So the other way that could also go down is Orochi just literally shoots Onigashima out of the sky with the Marine battleship. This was something I can't remember. This was on Arlong Park forums. I can't remember exactly who said it first, but credit to them. But someone did mention something I hadn't thought of before, which was the idea that the battleships and the pacifistas have gotten upgraded during the 2-year time skip, and we still haven't seen what that looks like. So it's possible that, you know, because people are speculating, like, oh, how could, you know, battleship change? One battleship change the course of this battle anyway, given the powers we're playing with. So that was a good point to mention, is that battleships potentially having been upgraded could be a reason why that could explain why, you know, like there's more firepower and things involved. That said, I also had another speculative idea, which was, how will the Marines potentially show up at Wano still? And if Orochi doesn't have his battleship yet, if he's going to, because Orochi right now does not have any control anymore. Like his big, kind of club that he was carrying was to threaten everyone else with was Kaido's support. He's like, oh, as long as I have Kaido backing me, no one can touch me. Now that he's lost his support, now that he's basically left defenseless, I wonder if he'll promise the Marines something, if he'll promise CP0 something, either for A, more battleships, or B, because I don't know if he's heard about this, if he's going to ask for the Marines, whatever science project, the new science division, the thing that they've built, I wonder if he'll demand that as payment for, helping to take down Kaido. So still a lot of moving pieces. I don't think this is even close to being the final battle. But we'll see how things play out. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have particularly to say. Nothing. That's it. I guess this will bring me kind of like to the fandom thoughts and kind of more personal things as well. So I know that my Chapter 1000 review is probably going to seem like a buzzkill to a lot of people. I know a lot of people don't feel, or probably don't feel the same way I do. I know a lot of people probably have loved this chapter. And I've seen a lot of posts on Twitter, with people being like, oh, doing the whole hashtag thank you, Oda. And then doing the whole, talking about how much the series has meant to them and all that. Mystics asks, hope we see an Elitist stream sometime today if you're able. I am definitely considering it. Probably won't be until right after this stream ends, so probably be a little bit later in the afternoon or evening, maybe around 3-ish. But yeah, I'll see. I'll announce something on Twitter if I'm going to do an Elitist stream or not. And I'll see how I feel. No, but I've been seeing all these like fandom posts, like being like, "Oh, thank you, Oda," and people being like, "Oh, I'm so grateful to be part of this fandom," and the people I've met every day, and things like that. And it's given me mixed feelings, and I've been kind of debating whether to talk about it or not. Because again, I don't want to seem like, I'm trying to harsh on people's buzz and like trying to put people down, or trying to be like, oh, why are you like trying to be like, oh, why are you so happy about this, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like trying to project like personal feelings and things on that. But I feel like this is something I should touch on at least a little bit. And the thing is, like, I have been following One Piece week to week for almost 12 plus years now. I caught up current with the series back in 2008, I want to say. And the first chapter I caught up on was, where the one where Zoro gets blipped away by Kuma's paw thing. And that was the first chapter I caught up to weekly. And ever since then, I have been reading the series week to week. And even though I've only been, like really involved in the fandom and debates, forums, things like that, for the past 4 years or so, like this series has been a significant part of my life. And it definitely also has, it definitely got into the series at a time when I needed it the most. And this is not for me to like trying to like legitimize like, my criticisms or anything else or stuff like that. It's just a point of like, I have been involved in the series for so long. And it's kind of disappointing though, like with that all said, it has been kind of disappointing seeing how criticism of the series has been handled by a large majority of the fandom, because because everyone kind of keeps repeating the phrase of like, oh, you shouldn't let a certain fandom define you, right? Criticism of a series isn't criticism of you. And people tend like to act like they acknowledge what that is and they understand what it is, without really understanding everything that encompasses. Because if something is, if something has been part of your life for that significant a period of time, even if it is a piece of fiction, I don't think it's realistic to kind of no try to. I don't think it's realistic to kind of say that, oh, this criticism of the series, what doesn't affect me at all. My feelings regarding the series, I can just completely separate them from my sense of self. Because having been down this path, having been someone that's been involved with the series for so long, I understand when people say, this series got me through so many milestones in my life. The series changed, me in so many ways, whether it's through the friends I made through the series, whether it's life lessons that kind of imparted to me at the moments I needed the most. I'm not trying to dismiss or diminish any of that, but I really, really dislike like how the fandom reacts to people that criticize the series fairly and rightly, and how they kind of isolate and shun them from the fandom. Like this is not something I think people like deliberately do. It's not like a deliberate like cold shouldering, being like, oh, you're not welcome here. But I don't think people really recognize or acknowledge the fact that there is an element of that is done to anyone that isn't, fanatically devoted to the series, that doesn't talk about how great it is weekly. Because it feels like everyone thinks that, anyone that criticizes the series is always harshing their buzz, or, they hate Oda, or they hate the series, and they just hate watching it and looking for reasons to criticize it because they have, nothing else to do, or they're just, addicted to criticizing the series or whatever. The thing is, like, this is the only series like that I've followed for this long. And if it was really that bad, like if I really hated it as much as people claim that I do, I would have dropped it so long ago. The series like, Promise Neverland or My Hero Academia are both ones I enjoyed to one degree or another, in recent years. And those ones I had no trouble dropping whatsoever. The moment that, I did not feel like they're up to par anymore, I had no problem dropping it. So it's not a case with One Piece of me like, oh, I'm just hate reading it or hate watching it. Up to this point, I'm just criticizing it for fun. I legitimately do love this series and what it was and what it stood for and what it meant to me. But more and more, as the fandom's growing, changing, and evolving, it has also become a lot more insular. Even the people that claim, like, oh, it's okay to let people criticize things, like let people criticize your faves. It feels a little bit hypocritical of them to do that, and a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? It feels almost like they're looking down on you a little bit, but trying to like placate you. Feels like they're trying to placate you, but be like, oh yeah, it's okay, you can criticize the series. It's just your opinion, things like that, which feels really dismissive, of legitimate concerns and critiques of the series that people have, especially when a lot of these are just people trying to point out, what the crit series does well and what it doesn't do well, which people don't really want to acknowledge or accept. But yeah, I don't know. I'll have more concrete thoughts at a later point once I can actually like flesh it out a little bit. But every time I see these posts about people like celebrating, like the love the fandom's shown them, like how welcoming, accepted they feel, all I think of is how there's a subsect of people that have been fridged out of the fandom, and who have left the fandom because of how unwelcome they've left, how unwelcome they felt. And I know like a large majority of the people don't really care, about like one or two people leaving the fandom, going on to other series for whatever reason. But it always made me at least a little bit sad, because I've met a lot of these people that used to be into One Piece and they dropped out of it for one reason or another. And it made me sad because they're so amazing. They're such amazing people that I've had the pleasure to get to know. And it saddens me that, they did not feel welcome or accepted or supported in a fandom that purports itself to be, accepting and welcoming and supportive of everyone. And so I feel like, at some point the fandom really needs to contend with how it reacts to people that criticize the series and how welcoming and accepting they are of them and how inclusive they make the fandom to them. But again, I'll save like larger broad thoughts for that with the One Piece podcast video because I think it's more pertinent to that discussion than this one. But just had some idle thoughts I wanted to get out there. With that said, I don't know. Like I've also been kind of debating what shape these reaction review videos for One Piece are going to take in the new year because I'm not sure if I'm really up to doing reaction reviews every week. Kind of just waiting for something to happen to kind of reinvigorate my interest. So I don't know if I'm just going to start going to just doing, reviews every week. So I read the chapter, gather some thoughts. And once I'm done that, then I'll just put out like a short video summarizing my thoughts on the chapter once I've had time to percolate some thoughts. So I don't know if I'm going to do that. I don't know if I'm going to do that as like a monthly thing where I'll do like monthly reaction reviews or just do monthly reviews with thoughts on like, every 4 chapters or something. But yeah, I'll see. I'll have to figure it out. It's 2 weeks until the next chapter. So we'll see how things go. If anyone has any opinions on that, if you want me to continue doing these reaction reviews, if you really like them, then let me know. I'll definitely take that into consideration. Maybe I'll run a Twitter poll as well to kind of gauge interest in this to see whether the direction it'll take. With that said, as always, thank you for everyone that tuned into the stream. I hope you enjoyed. I know it was a little longer than most, but I had a lot of thoughts to get out. But yeah, so thank you all for tuning in. As always, if you like my content, please do like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll try to get to Alita later today if I can. And until next time, this is Ash. Talk to you all later.